Well, welcome to the Changes in Secondary Music Curriculum Provision Over Time 2012 to 16 webinar delivered by the ISM Trust. I'm Duncan Mackrill, and both me and my colleague Ali Daubney are from the University of Sussex. And before we begin, we're just going to go over one or two technical points. You can't see us and we can't see you, but you should be able to see our PowerPoint presentation. You should also be able to hear us, but we can't hear you. So if you have any questions, please type them in the question box and we'll answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on the ISM's website at ism.org/webinars. So firstly, thank you for coming and joining in with the webinar. And we know that many of you will have contributed to the research that we took, and we really do thank you for that. Considerable time, implication for you, and effort, particularly at the end of the year, and we thank you for doing that. So today we're going to give an initial overview of the research, and it's recognised that, or we recognised that we needed to gather a considerable amount of information about what was happening to the music curriculum over time. And so we identified this need, and we started off by doing a pilot survey locally in 2015, and from that then we refined some of our questions and our questionnaire, and we then developed what you, or many of you, will have completed. We're delighted to be supported by the ISM and Music Mark in this, and between us we sent to our contacts and to music hubs, to individual schools, etc., the invitation to participate in this survey. And the survey opened in early June and closed on the 1st of September. For this webinar, we're concentrating on reporting on England, although we do have some limited data also on Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, which we'll draw on later. Over to you, Ali.
Thank you. So I'll start off by giving you a quick geographical breakdown of the data. You can see hopefully from the pie chart that's now in front of you, that we did get responses from everywhere. Actually, we did get responses from Scotland, Northern Ireland and other. The reason they don't show up is because of the small percentages of those. Actually, we got 718 responses which we've included and another 37 which we've excluded. The reasons for the exclusions were, some of them, the first question was, are you in England, Ireland, Scotland or Wales? And if they put no, it took them straight to the last question and said thank you very much. But we still got a few people who said no, so we had to exclude those. Then we also had a few duplicates where people in the same school had responded, and so the 718 which we've included actually is 718 unique schools. So that's another reason for the exclusion. Plus there were a couple that we couldn't identify the schools from the data, and because that's important to the way in which we will be feature analysing, then we also had to exclude those. But actually we've got a very, very healthy data set, particularly from England, 705 responses, and delighted to see one British overseas state school included in there as well. So when we talk about some of the data today, we will be including this from it. The first thing we want to look at is the profile of staff, and this was part of the reason for looking at this. Is when we had duplicate responses, we took the responses from people who'd been in the school for the longest amount of time, and actually there was a huge correlation when we looked through the data about the responses, as you would hope, from different staff in the same schools. It's interesting to see that most of the people who responded had been teaching in their particular school for between 6 and 10 years. If you look at the jobs of the staff, many of them were directors of music, heads of faculty. There were some who described themselves as a music teacher, a few who were also part of senior leadership teams, and one teacher who had been teaching in the same school for 41 plus years. The type of school is also a very interesting point. We looked at breaking them down And some schools actually identify in lots of different ways, so they may be an academy and a faith school, or a special school and a teaching school, but actually for the purposes of today, what we've done is we've taken the main way in which they identify themselves, so the data set adds up to 100%. As time goes by, we will be analysing data in different ways to look at, for example, faith schools. We also looked at their Ofsted grading. You can see in front of you the way in which that breaks down, and there's another way of looking at the Ofsted grading here. So between the two, you can see the Ofsted grading and the type of school, and then looking at the Ofsted grading of the sample. So we are fairly sure, but we're going to be checking it out with Ofsted over the next few weeks, that our data set is quite representative of the schools currently in the UK. The next graph which we've got on here is just from England, and that's because of the Ofsted gradings and how they relate to English schools. It's quite interesting on here to see how different schools are graded. It's not surprising perhaps that academies who are not part of a multi-academy trust, most of which are converter academies, have got the most outstanding gradings, and that was related, and the same with the teaching schools, and that's related to the way in which, or the circumstances in which they converted. And once again, we think with this that our data sample is reasonably kind of related to the school profiles in the UK, or certainly in England. And here's another way of breaking down the schools, just so that you can see, actually there are some teaching schools, but they didn't identify first as teaching schools. They identified as either academies not in multi-academy trusts or those in multi-academy trusts. Interesting, we've got independent schools, 7%, which is about what we would expect to see. So we opened this up to all kinds of schools. And today, as Duncan said earlier, we're giving the headlines of the results. And that means that over time we'll be able to break them down further by different school types and looking at the different ways in which they are related. So the first kind of main thing, I suppose, which we were interested in was looking at the levels of the staffing in the schools and how these may have changed over time. So based on the data that we got 655 responses which showed data in 2012 right through to 2016-17, and we were asking about full-time equivalents of staff. And you can see on this that 44% were the same, 17% there were more staff teaching music in 2016-17 than there were in 2012, and in 39% of these 655 schools, the full-time equivalency in the music department, that's excluding the instrumental staff, so thinking about curriculum, was actually falling. However, that's not really the whole picture, because we also got quite a few responses in the qualitative parts of the survey which told us other things about what's happening in staffing. So, for example, a quote from a Ofsted graded good academy, which is not a multi-academy trust, said that from September 2016 a system called Rapid Plus is being introduced, meaning that bottom sets will not receive any music from a specialist teacher, and any music provision given will be literacy focused. So although these staff are listed as music staff and working with the music curriculum, it's not always the case that every child has access in a secondary school to a what might be called a qualified or a experienced music teacher. So for example, another school said that their bottom sets were taught by a science teacher. Other schools gave justifications as to why the school full-time equivalents were changing. Now, of course, we looked over the 5 years and we only included the data over the 5 years. There are some other schools in the data set, a small number, which have been open for less than 5 years. So, of course, their numbers would be rising, but they are not included in this because this is literally across the 5 years. Reasons such as staff redundancies, unfortunately, meaning staff are made redundant to balance the books. This also impacts on the curriculum time which is available, the specialist teachers which are available, and the choices available at Key Stage 4 because if you have only got limited resources and you want to put your resources into Key Stage 4, something has to give, and often that seems to have been Key Stage 3. So all of these are issues, but another issue that's related to this is around the initial teacher education and the recruitment. Do you want to talk about this, Duncan? The numbers of staff, well, I'll carry on. The numbers of students who are recruited into teacher training has been going down over the past few years. And so this means that there's less staff available for teaching music. And so if the number of music teachers is not maintained, we would expect to see a fall in the staff.
Although that might change in the coming year, where there seem to be more places available for ITE music teachers. So we'll see how that goes. It's something to look at over the coming year.
We broke the staffing levels down into various ways of thinking about how long people had been, sorry, not how long they've been teaching, but the full-time equivalency of the number of staff in the school. And one of the things to note on the data which I've just put up here is that there are quite a lot of schools where there is no music teaching, and actually beyond the survey we got a lot of unsolicited emails from teachers who said, oh, there is no music in my school anymore. So these weren't people who filled in our questionnaire, but the data you see here is around people who filled in the questionnaire. But you can see that there is a minority of schools that responded where there are no full-time equivalent teachers over time. And we've thought about this data in various ways. So here it is showing on the left-hand side the number of schools with no full-time equivalents. You can see that there's a peak actually in 2012 and 2016 in 1.5 to 2 full-time equivalent teachers, but you can see that actually in 2012 to 13 there were more teachers generally in a department than in 2016-17. And another way to think about this, we were thinking about the problems that we know about with teacher isolation and the departments with a maximum of 1 full-time equivalent teacher. So that's, as you can see at the bottom, schools that have got no full-time equivalent teachers, and schools which have got 0.1 or just above 0 to 1 equivalent teacher. And so over time, if you look on the left of the graph, you can see that in 2012 there were less schools with 1 full-time teacher as a maximum. So this is a worrying trend, I think, that we want to bring to attention. And I think we certainly, within our roles, we know a lot of schools where this is the case, where the amount of teachers is being cut. So this is just something to be mindful of, and we think this will continue to grow in the future if the data is carrying on in this kind of generally towards a one-person department. And this causes significant issues for music teachers, just to be just the one person there. And this has been the subject of quite a lot of research and a lot of discussion and professional development. So another thing we were interested in with staff was around technical support. And in the graph, the pie chart that you can see here, you can see that actually only 30% of the responding schools said that they had any technical support between 2012 and 2016 and 17. And the next question following on from that was, if they had technical support, had the support gone up, gone down, stayed the same, or perhaps they didn't know because they hadn't been in the school for long enough. So there were 30% who said they had technical support at some point, and of those, 42% have said that the technical support has actually now gone down. So there's quite a lot involved in staffing and staff time, but the next big area that we looked at was around the curriculum time, and there's quite a lot of data on these, and the top part relates to where the curriculum is taught to Year 7 every week, whereas the bottom part is about the carousel. So where it says modal time minutes per week, actually that's relating to where they have a music lesson every week. And it's quite interesting that the modal time minutes per week has remained at 60 throughout, and we got really big data returns for these. You can see that the range of minutes, you know, some children are getting half an hour a week, or they were in 2012-13, and some children are now getting 25 minutes per week as an average, and that's reported by the staff. And some schools, a very small number of schools, 240 minutes per week, which is made up in lots of different ways. So this relates mostly to music specialist schools, and there's an interesting response from a school which is a free school, which says all Key Stage 3 pupils get 2 hours a week learning an instrument. So of course that's also included as part of the time here within the 240 minutes. The mean minutes per week is going down slightly. It's a very small change in Year 7 from 65 down to 63. And then carousels, where there were carousel models, which we'll be looking at a little bit more detail in a minute, you can see that where they had a carousel, the most they had in 2012-13 was 50 minutes a week for 28 weeks. And in 2016-17, it was 135 minutes a week for 18 weeks. Whereas when they don't have a carousel very often, for example, in 2015-16, some Year 7 pupils, their entire music curriculum was squeezed into 25 minutes for 6 weeks over the entire year. And so actually the input and the outputs that you might expect have got to be substantially different in schools that are offering 25 minutes a week for 6 weeks to those which are offering 240 minutes per week, or even 60 minutes per week. So this is related to Year 7. And Year 8, what I wanted to really pick out is that in this current academic year, there's been a rise in the number of carousels which have been introduced into Year 7, Year 8 and Year 9, but particularly into Year 8 and Year 9. And you can see from this graph here that in 2016-17, the mean average hours over the year has decreased significantly, which is a worrying trend. So you can see it was fairly stable until the year coming. And there are lots of reasons given for the erosion of curriculum time. So for example, there were quite a few entries where it said that the time was given to other subjects. For example, modern foreign languages, maths, English, computer science, drama, dance, PE, a whole range of other subjects. Sometimes it was related to poor GCSE results for older children, and then they were reducing the curriculum time to make sure, or to try and overcome the impact of that for pupils in the future, taking time away from music and offering it, for example, to mathematics. And the EBacc starts to crop up, the impact of the EBacc even within Key Stage 3. So some teachers specifically mentioned that the EBacc focuses negatively on the breadth of the curriculum which is offered at Key Stage 3, and that's another reason for an introduction of a carousel. Because if a carousel is introduced, it means that a number of subjects usually get less time over the year, and that's really, music and the arts are given at the expense really of having more time available for what might be considered to be core subjects. So music is placed on a carousel with other art subjects, and therefore there's also comments within our data set about the lack of continuity, and how the lack of continuity is a real issue for uptake in the future, because perhaps children haven't studied music for quite some time, and also for the lack of continuity impacting progress. And so if they're not having a music lesson every week and they're only having it 7 weeks in one year and then 7 weeks in the next, it's really having a significant impact. And there's an interesting quote here from a school where they said that the teachers had to, in their words, accept compromise to have less lesson time, but that meant that they avoided the carousel. So they would have, instead of having 2 lessons a fortnight, they may have 1 lesson a fortnight. And that meant that the carousel model didn't have to be introduced, but they felt that having the continuity was more important, or certainly as important. If we have a quick look at the Year 8 curriculum time, excuse me, the modal time per minute on this is still 60, There are more carousels being introduced into year 8 than there were previously, and the mean average hours over the year actually hasn't changed very much on the carousels in year 8. I think some of the most interesting things around year 8 are from the carousels from this year. If we move on to year 9, this is an interesting set of data. It talks about curriculum provision, and we asked about the carousels and whether they were, well, the provision per se, and whether it was across the whole year, whether it was optional, and whether they could actually opt into it, or whether it was compulsory across the whole year. And what you can see from this is that there are more and more optional models coming into year 9. So at this point we can be quite clear that music is not actually delivered. There was something recently from Boris Johnson, the Mayor of London, talking about the London Music Pledge and saying that isn't it fantastic that all children up to the age of 14 have the right every single week to a music lesson in school. Well, actually you can see from this that that isn't really the case, because there are a significant number of schools where music is now optional in year 9, and that's often to do with schools moving towards a key stage 3 model, which is only for 2 years, and then a key stage 4 model, which is for 3 years. So where there is also an option, there's also carousels in there. So it's not just the carousels that's the issue in year 9, it's the actual provision and whether it's compulsory. So across the data you can see that in year 9 compulsory music education has gone down year on year for year 9. It's fairly static at nearly 100%, but not quite 100% in year 7. And there has been a small fall in year 8, and this means that even in year 7 and 8 not all children have got compulsory music education, which is, I think, something that we do need to be very concerned about. It's, however, quite pleasing to see that a large number of schools have maintained compulsory music provision in year 7 and year 8. So I'm going to pass over to Duncan, who's going to talk for a little bit about some of the things in Key Stage 4 and 5, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of Key Stage 3.
Thanks, Ali. So as we move into Key Stage 4 and 5, we're going to be looking at the qualifications that are offered by schools. We're going to look at some of the changes in provision over time and the amount of minutes that schools are doing, at least on average, for Key Stage 4. It's important to note that the data we've got, it's really complex. We're really pleased with the quality of the data, but there are lots of complexities, and so this is an initial look. We will be giving figures and things like that later on, but we still need to do some more work on that before we can actually give cast iron figures. So one of the things we looked at was, we said, can every pupil opt for music at Key Stage 4 should they wish to? Now this is an entitlement. The DfE gave a directive that all pupils should be able to access the curriculum, but as you can see, we found that getting on for 20% can't actually opt for music for a variety of reasons, because they're being channeled into what we might term as bunny ears, academic subjects, those bunny ears, or because they have to do extra work on literacy or numeracy or whatever. But there are some significant barriers to every pupil, it seems, being able to, or having the opportunity to opt for music at Key Stage 4. We also asked about whether there were any specific entry criteria. And so we had, again, as you can see, about 20% saying that actually there were specific entry criteria for this. So what sort of things might those be? Well, generally it's around participation in an instrumental group or in a choir. Sometimes it's around actually taking a grade exam. Some people said that then pupils needed to achieve a level 6 or a 7 at Key Stage 3 before they could move on. But generally, it was just about being active musicians before they could go to Key Stage 4.
There's an interesting question just popped up, or a statement really, saying, but surely if they're not suitable for music, it would be far too challenging. I suppose the point about that is that music has to be available to everybody, whether they're going to get in new GCSE money a grade 1 at the end or a grade 9 at the end. So, I mean, this is just an interesting point which is kind of popped up from the data rather than something that we're saying, yes, they should be able to opt into or no, they shouldn't. So it's not really a judgment on our part. It's just really kind of relating what the requirements are of them at the moment.
Yeah. And then we asked, as a result, or what did people think that the English or what was the effect that the English baccalaureate had had? So was it neutral? Was it negative? Was it positive? You can see overwhelmingly, not unsurprisingly, the responses were negative. There were some positives, a few, and quite a significant number of neutral ones, but generally the overwhelming response was that the EBacc had been a negative measure in terms of encouraging people to take music at Key Stage 4.
The EBacc question that we asked, actually we also got some interesting comments that weren't just related to the curriculum itself, so I think we're going to be looking a little bit later in the presentation at the impact it's had across schools more broadly as well.
We also have tried to categorise the qualifications that are available then for Key Stage 4. So we started at 2012 and 13. So here you can see that we've looked at where GCSE is on offer or GCSE and other courses, and there are quite a number of schools that are offering GCSE and BTEC or rock school or whatever. And so then that third bar, you'll see it says the total offering GCSE. So we've got a significant number of schools offering GCSE, as we would expect. And then BTEC Level 2, again, you can see that that also is offered in collaboration with other courses as well. The significant thing to remember about this is that with many schools moving towards a condensed Key Stage 3, pupils are opting to do GCSE in Year 9. And so these figures are really artificially, we might say, inflated, because you've got those in Year 10, and if they've just started Year 9 on them as well, you're going to get an increase in numbers. So as we go on, we might well see, and we would expect to see, those numbers coming down. So at the moment, that includes that, and one of the things that we want to do is actually look at the data more closely to see where it was a key stage, sorry, a 2-year Key Stage 3, and then how that might have impacted on numbers.
There's also another big caveat on this actual bit of data, in that according to the DFE data, in 2014-15 there were 1,898 schools which didn't offer music in Key Stage 4. And so actually, of course, the schools generally, as you can see from the data set at the beginning, that opted to complete our questionnaire were often schools which have got Key Stage 4, and so that we're only reporting within our own data set, but we know that there are a significant number of schools already which are not offering any Key Stage 4.
Yeah. You can see there are a number of other courses available, NCFE, music technology, but that and rock school and others are really quite small in number. So we're concentrating on GCSE and BTEC here. And then if we move to 2016-17, you can see GCSE reasonably healthy, but again, same caveat, remember that that includes those that have just moved to a 3-year Key Stage 4. But the big difference is in the BTEC, and we can see that's dropped considerably. And actually, we've calculated that drop in BTEC is 70%, which we think is extremely significant for the number of schools offering BTEC. So GCSE, yes, there are numbers doing that, but many of the other courses, there's a significant reduction in opportunities for doing other music courses at Key Stage 4, as from 16-17. Okay, we looked at curriculum time, and we asked, is all your curriculum time allocated in school hours, so as curriculum time? You can see most say it is, nearly 89%, but 11% are saying no, it isn't. So when is it offered? Well, no surprise, it's being offered after school, generally, as twilight sessions, and that's for a variety of reasons, but it's essentially to small numbers, and so that seems to be a justification for schools saying, well, you need to teach this out of school curriculum time because there are not enough that are opting for it in as an option within the curriculum itself. So that's worrying that those figures are so high. And then looking at the time that's spent on GCSE and BTEC, so we can see for GCSE between 2012 and the current year, actually times spent on GCSE has changed very little. This is obviously an average, there are fluctuations, but taken as an average, see very little change. And then for BTEC, same sort of thing. So 4 minutes up on GCSE and 4 minutes down on BTEC, so it's neither here nor there. Okay, so moving forward to Key Stage 5, we've put here active responses. What do active responses mean? Well, they're schools that are responding and saying that they are delivering or were delivering AS and A-level music. Obviously, there are many that are not. So in 2012, there were 191 from the people that responded, and their average number of students, you see, was 5. That's maintained pretty well the same to 5.2, but you can see the number has gone down from 191 to 175, so that's a 9% fall in AS music. And then again in A-level music, a similar rise. Why might that be? Well, it seems to be that AS courses are reducing, but we seem to be, and we need to investigate this further, there seems to be a slight increase when it gets to the A-level itself.
We know that the qualifications are changing this year with the AS and the A-level becoming decoupled, and so we're guessing that that's actually also having some impact on the amount of schools which are offering the AS level as well as the A-level.
Yeah. And then moving on to music technology, we can see that now this is quite significant, that there's a 20% fall in music technology from 2012 to the current year. The average number of students is staying more or less the same, but the number of schools offering that has reduced quite significantly. Some of that, I think, will be to do with schools joining up and perhaps sending pupils to one school rather than another, particularly if they're in a chain, perhaps an academy chain, where one school will do the music technology, one school will do another subject, or just not offer music technology. But the number of schools offering has dropped, and the same for A-level music technology. So you can see a fairly similar fall at 17.2%. Just perhaps something else to say about music tech. We looked at some of the reasons why people are dropping music technology. Well, of course, numbers, expensive equipment, but nothing really clear. There were some comments about the marking and that it was difficult to predict. That's a bit of a shame, but there is now a new A-level music technology, as I'm sure you're aware, starting, and so that's a good opportunity.
There's also quite a nice comment which has just come in from a teacher who says it will be difficult to know what the AS numbers will be this year, as AS and A-level has to be co-teachable, and I suspect that many teachers will have to make this decision at the last minute according to their cohort, as ever, a flexible music teacher,
yes.
Which I think really kind of sums up the point.
Indeed, yeah, we do have one or two comments like that, certainly, that yes, they have to be co-taught, and we'll be looking at that in more detail.
There's another point which has popped up saying, as a BTEC standards verifier, it concerns the person who's written in that there's much negativity towards the qualification. And actually, what we're not saying from our data is that there's negativity towards the qualification. We're really just reporting the numbers. And is there likely to be further investigation into the reasoning of the level 2 drop? Actually, one of the purposes of today is for us to think about what is it that we want to investigate within the data, kind of, at a later stage. So that's certainly very interesting. It says, is this information shared with Pearson? Actually, the information is hot off the press. So if Pearson have tuned in today, then hopefully they are listening. And if not, the webinar will be online for them to see it themselves. So yes, we are more than happy for you to be able to share the data, which we're putting up today through the webinar.
And just going back to the A-level as well, one of the other things is that music A-level is not seen as a facilitating subject. That came up quite a few times with people saying as to why they thought there was reason for the change on reduction in A-level music being offered. Of course, it's being financially available. That varies in numbers. Some people saying, well, we need 6 or more to be able to offer that, with others saying we have to run 12 students or more to be allowed to run an A-level.
A lot of the reasons which come up for choosing a particular subject, and actually there's something which somebody's already put, relates to the impact for the people and things from outside. So for example, the Russell Group facilitating subjects, which we know is working against music, but at all stages, not just at A-level, but at GCSE, and where children opt in sometimes aged 12 to whether they want to do music. Parental pressure has got a huge impact on that for some children and in some schools. And also we know that there's a lot of other pressures in schools, and children are actively, shall we say, steered away from taking certain subjects, and sometimes that's not for their good. It's for the way in which, well, it is reported that it's the way in which schools are judged. So for example, back to your league tables and when they're taking EBacc subjects. And so this squeeze on subjects lower down is really likely to be part of the impact on the AS and the A-level music and music technology and the BTECs and the other qualifications in the future. So it's partly around the status of music, and it's partly around other people and how they perceive music and the impact they have over young people's choices.
Yeah, and it's not all bad news. We do have some good stories at GCSE with, and one of the things we want to do is to pull out some of those good news stories and look at where music is on the up, and it has increased student numbers, it has multiple courses available, good amount of curriculum time. How are those teachers achieving that? And we have got some examples that we'll be pulling out to share with you.
Here's one, for example, that I picked out. It says that in Year 9, where schools let children opt for particular subjects, they still have a music enrichment programme, which means that even if the art subject's not going to be studied beyond the end of the Year 8, then all students get some music, and they can opt for then extra music within that. So that's certainly one of the good news stories. On the other side of that, though, are stories such as the top sets and the bottom sets not being offered any music at Key Stage 3. So it's not just that they're not allowed to opt into it at Key Stage 4, but actually the opportunities and the doors have been closed to them before they get that point. And we found it very interesting that it's the top sets and the bottom sets. The bottom sets taken out for booster classes, and the top sets because it's perhaps a distraction from the EBacc subjects which they want to gear children towards. There are quite a lot of comments in the data around these things.
And then lastly, looking at BTEC Level 3, we can see again there is a fall. It's not nearly as dramatic as at Level 2, where we had that 70% drop. Here we've got a 12.3%. fall and a slight decrease on the number of students, but clearly BTEC is reducing as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just go through a little summary of some of the things that we think are important and look at where we're going next, and then we'd like to take questions. Annie, do you want to go over?
So in terms of Key Stage 3, I mean, the things that we were particularly interested in over time were the curriculum models and the staffing and the amount of time. So as we've kind of already alluded to within the presentation to this point, the Key Stage 3 trend is moving towards Carousel in Year 8, which is a slight worry. And in Year 9, there's a much bigger amount of carousels for in place for where music is still compulsory. And of course, you know, all of this kind of erodes the options. Now, that's sometimes good news and sometimes bad news, because one of the things about Year 9 is that because it's become an optional subject in a lot of schools, then specifically Year 9 are getting a lot more time in music than they would do if it was still a curriculum subject, because obviously they've dropped other subjects along the way. So it's a kind of double-edged sword. For those that opt, they get more, and for those which for whatever reason haven't, you know, there's a worrying trend of it not being available. The curriculum time in Year 7 and 8 is something certainly to be mindful of in the future. And in Year 9, we would expect to see a rise in the curriculum time, as I just said, because it's decreasing elsewhere. The staffing numbers are also a great concern, and something which I hope, and as Duncan said, that the recruitment into our profession in the future is going to kind of partly help, but also the way in which music is perceived within schools, supported within schools, is you know, hopefully going to help in the future. Somebody's just left a comment to say becoming an optional subject in Year 9 enables to focus on those who wish to study and avoid behaviour issues with those who are not interested. And actually that's something which came up when we did the pilot study, something which the teachers discussed. Quite a lot of teachers responded to that, talking about Year 9 and the pupils who were opting into it at that point. So again, it's quite a complex issue, which I think needs some more kind of thought and things in the future. The technical support. Well, technical support can be really, really important in a music department or many other departments in the school. So again, it's something we have to keep an eye on. Yes, we do know that it's going down in quite a number of schools. Something that we have to do within the data is to look at the types of schools. Because, for example, with the schools where they were offering a huge amount of music in comparison to other schools, in Year 7 and 8, I had a quick look at the types of schools, and they tended to be independent schools. And in all but 2 cases, and those 2 cases were both in Wales, all of those schools were also good and outstanding, which probably says something about the trends which we need to be looking at about the types of schools and the Ofsted grading, and how that might impact upon a lot of this data. The last point on here, we just really covered about the parents and the senior leaders.
So some of the other important things about curriculum time at Key Stage 4 being broadly maintained, looking at the growing number of schools that are offering Key Stage 4, the decrease in BTEC, and the majority of schools that consider the introduction of EBacc as having a negative impact. Now we want to pull out and look at the correlation between the type of school, the Ofsted grade, curriculum time, all those sort of things. There's a lot of work to do still on that, where we will then hopefully be able to have some more concrete information to share with you on that. And then the ongoing concern about that fall in numbers for AS and A level, particularly at music technology, but also at music A level. So then we're looking at what we do next. So we will be speaking at the Music Mark conference coming up we will be doing a number of publications, and you will be able to get something in writing in time, but it's still actually very early days. The survey only closed beginning of last month, and we have a lot of work still to do on pulling out some of the underlying stories and connections going on. So much more work on analysis, but we would also like to know from you what you think we should be looking at and what would be of interest or use to you. So this could open up the floodgates, and we've had lots and lots of people suggesting things, but we really would like you to give some input on that. That could be either with some questions that you do now, or you've got our contact details on the screen, or you can find us on the Sussex website, or just Google us and we'll get that easily enough, and you'll find us easily enough, and just let us know what you think would be important for you.
So there's a few other things to finish off with which have popped up on the screen, just thoughts from other people. There's one here which says the new GCSE music curriculum expects and asks more from students, and actually by increasing the time in Year 9 with the pre-option group can be really helpful for bridging the gap, because potentially you get the double time for that. And there are some interesting models of that which have popped up, and some schools use Year 8 or 9 to offer tasters in a range of subjects, and then they choose. And I know I was talking earlier about carousels, but actually some schools are starting Key Stage 3 not just at the beginning of the year, but also part-way through the year. So for example, after Christmas, after Easter, or in the final half term, so that they get a flavour of the different subjects, and then within the Year 9 for the rest of the year they get to specialise in something. There's a couple of others here. Something we could look at is the borough county music. It's just moved, hang on, which many have of which have funding cuts. Now the thing about our data set is that I have actually been through the schools list and looked at where each of the schools is located, and for some areas and for some boroughs we got really good data returns, and we would be able to split that down, but for others it would be really a little bit careless of us to do that, because the data that we have wouldn't necessarily be representative of the entire borough. So yes, in certain cases we can do that, and as you can see from the beginning we've got a lot in the southeast, and there's a few kind of patches around well, within the southeast and other places where we would have enough data to do that. There's somebody talking about dropping GCSE an octave for the rock school qualifications level 2 from Year 9 onwards, and there are some models in there, the data around Year 9 being used for different qualifications, the rock school, and that's reported both positively and negatively. So for example, as Jason's saying here, the RSL level 2 being introduced from Year 9, but then there's another school who said that half of their year group used to do BTEC in Year 9, and that's now been cut. So you know, there are various reasons for that. Somebody's suggesting it could be interesting to look at the trends for GCSE uptake in relation to the type of music curriculum offered at Key Stage 3, and actually I'm very interested to look through the data and think about the time that's offered at Key Stage 3. So for example, I haven't looked yet to see the school which has got 25 minutes for 6 or 7 weeks in Year 7, what is their uptake for Key Stage 3? I would really like to look at how schools are ensuring instrumental vocal tuition is oh, it's not there. Yeah, it's accessible to all pupils. The school has a 40% pupil premium. Now there is a DFE publication which I'll see if I can find the link for, which talks about how pupil premium may be used for instrumental tuition, and that it's not ring-fenced and it can be used for instrumental tuition. It specifically relates to the Key Stage 4. So that may be something for the future for them to be able to look at. We're trying to collect questions, so they're coming in thick and fast. So hopefully that thing around pupil premium will help for the future. It would be interesting to compare academies, free schools, grammar schools, independent schools to see if there are any patterns. Yeah. Absolutely, definitely would. Right. And that's something that now we've kind of got the headlines out of this. We can start splitting our huge data set. It is an absolutely mammoth beast, I think, we've created here.
Somebody else talking about looking at instruments and pupils learning a musical instrument, either to complement or replace the curriculum based on balance of performing, listening, composing and appraising. It'd be interesting to note how this impacts on the uptake and quality of Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5 music. There are some things that we might be able to look there certainly and see impact. Impact is a tricky thing to look at.
Yeah, well, really, correlation may be possible in some cases, but actually that's possibly something for the future as well, because such programs probably haven't been running for all that long to be running right through already to the A level. There's a lovely story here from Jason saying the rock school courses worked well for their Key Stage 5, and although it's a small school, 3 of the students went off to study music at university, which is fantastic. And that's influenced by the school's decision to change to the rock school qualifications at level 2. So, finding what is right for you and for your pupils in any setting is obviously really, really important.
Somebody else is asking us to look at pupil premium and how that works, and where 40% of the school is on pupil premium, but parents are being asked to charge, and they're asking us to look at how that might work. Now, if we've got, I think that would be difficult to do from the data we have and responses, but I think that's a really interesting area to look at.
We asked within our data set, there was a question at the bottom about would people be interested in talking to us further in the future, and a significant number, most of the teachers who responded said yes they would. A few people said no, I'm just changing school, or I'm stopping teaching music, or I'm going on maternity leave or whatever, but we have got a big amount of people that we can now go back to ask. Anthony's asked us if there's any opportunities to present these findings to the government DFE. Well, we hope by doing events like today that the people who really need to hear these will take them to the people who really need to hear them. So yes, hopefully, Anthony, that is something that the organisations who may be listening to this today, who have got that direct kind of line, may be able to do something about.
And we'll be ready for that when we've looked more at the data and got some really good figures and things that we can be really confident about, some significant trends that we can then share with people.
There's something popped up from Samantha about ABRSM graded exams. She's saying now they count towards the pupil premium scores at Key Stage 4 and 5 because of course they go into the buckets. Is there trends towards schools using these instead of GCSE? I mean, it's kind of early days on that, but actually within the data that we got, some of the other related to what else is offered, and they said grade 5 theory, for example, or graded music exam. So what we won't be able to tell from the data that we've got at the minute is if there's a trend towards schools using those instead of GCSE. However, I think that's a really, really interesting point, which we should be looking at from next year. I'm still quite unclear about how the ABRSM and other exams are going to go into the buckets, when as far as I know you don't have to prove who you are to turn up to do them. So the kind of way in which they're going to get into a bucket is still a bit of an enigma to me. We've got one here that says, can we be more proactive? It's a very powerful data set. We absolutely think it's a very proactive data set. It's a very powerful data set, and we are certainly going to be proactive. There's a message on the bottom, thank you, Dick Hallam, says great presentation and info. Now we are meeting next week with MEC, with ISM and with Music Mark, because that's the 2 subject associations for music, and MEC, which is the umbrella organisation, and in terms of trying to take our data forward, we believe that they are the people that we need to be talking to. and they are the people that go and talk to the DFE. So yeah, thank you for your positivity, Dick, and we're really looking forward to discussing this further with you next Wednesday. So I think there's another one here with GCSE, with no, this is from Jason again, with no instrumental lessons, more Key Stage 4 time spent learning instruments, which is essential for the coursework element, and the students then suffer from exam prep. And this is just a point that he's making, because more time has to be spent on the practical, the instrumental, and perhaps not mentioned here, but the composing and, you know, specifically that kind of side of things. And I think there's something that we can pull out of our data and actually look at other subjects, because I know that, for example, art have done quite a rigorous survey of art teachers about how much time is spent. I'm fascinated to know how the amount of time, the average, I think it was 150 minutes or so for music, stacks up against other subjects, because after all, a GCSE is a GCSE, and they are apparently equivalent, but I know that children get a lot more lessons of, for example, science, maths and English, or other subjects such as modern foreign languages in some schools than they do for music. So one of the things that will be interesting that we will be able to do for my data set is to look at whether there's actually any equality in the relationship between how much time is given to music and how much time is given to other subjects. I think we've probably dealt with most of the questions which have come in. We'll just have a quick flick back and check if there's anything else. But essentially we're open to ideas as to what to do with the data. We didn't collect this data for sitting writing academic journal articles. We collected it because we felt it would be useful to do a big survey such as this, and we are really genuinely interested in knowing you know, how we can use it to best help the people which we want to help, which is basically the teachers we work with day in, day out in schools. There's two other things which have just come in. Catherine, thank you for your question, which is, do we have any plan on looking at primary music? I would say personally, we don't have a plan to look at primary music at this point in time, but I'm sure there are other people who may want to go away and look at primary music, and perhaps there's something which is already happening. I feel that Duncan and I have bitten off a lot with the size of the data set that we have.
There's one from Paul about surely for music to be given more curriculum time, the decision comes from the SLT at the school and how they support it. Absolutely, SLT is a significant factor, and hopefully some of the findings that we publish over time might well be beneficial to people to share with SLTs one way or another, either within school or from music hubs or whatever.
And I almost cheered out loud when I read through the data set and realised that some of the people who had responded were also senior leaders in schools, as well as being music teachers or somehow involved in the music faculty. So I think it is really important that we try and influence senior leaders in school. And I mean, we have to be very careful with this data and the messaging that we give around it, that we're not just mood hoovering so they go, oh, do you know, we won't bother with that music rubbish anymore. Because actually we all do so much for pupils with the music. So we just have to be kind of mindful of the people that we need to go away and positively influence. I think that pretty much is drawing us towards the end today. Thank you for your thanks, which have started coming in. Oh, and another load of things. Julie has made a very interesting point about what hubs must do, and that Ofsted were very clear that education hubs must have challenging conversations with schools, and that can be quite challenging itself, especially in secondary schools. So, you know, I'd be interested to know how in the future that's going to go forward, and I think that's something that we can't really tell with this data set, but it is important for us to be able to get this information out to the hubs. And actually we're going to be doing something hopefully with Music Mark at the Music Mark conference. There's just one last point, or two last points. Right.
So somebody's asking, Stavros is asking about the BTEC at level 2, and it would be interesting to identify the reasons behind the drop. Yes, we hope to be able to pull some things out for that.
Aileen has just said, is there any worth in considering the evidence for a trend towards consortia of schools working to deliver AS and A level? I think we're going to be able to pull some of that out from this data and where that's happened. But we know that that can be positive and negative, because I've certainly read comments where schools have been very disappointed that their students have then decided to go to study all of their subjects in another school.
Mark is saying, thank you, Mark, for that you'd love to stay involved. It's probably a point just to say that we have also identified some follow-up questions that we would like, or some clarification for some of the responses from some people. So we will be emailing or getting in contact with people for more information where we think that would be really valuable.
So just to kind of round off, because we just hit 5 o'clock, there's a point on there from Catherine saying, will the PowerPoint be available online afterwards? The PowerPoint will be available alongside the webinar, which in the next few days it will very quickly be put on. But at this point we have to sign off. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll be in touch with more information when we have time to do some more analysis. Thank you.